Have you noticed your grocery bill creeping up, or that a simple cup of coffee costs more than it did last year? Every shopping trip it feels like your money just doesn't go as far. It's not just groceries. Rent, fuel, even streaming services are all getting pricier. This isn't about poor budgeting, it's a widespread economic shift. The real question is, why does your money buy less each year? Understanding this trend is the first step to taking control. The answer? Inflation. A force shaping your financial world every day. Let's pull back the curtain and see what's really going on. So, what is inflation and why does it matter to you? Forget the jargon. At its core, inflation is simply the rise in prices over time. We'll break it down with real-world examples, not complicated theories. Understanding inflation helps you protect your money and make smarter choices. It's not just news for economists, it affects your wallet every day. Let's get clear on what's happening and why it matters. Ready to unravel the mystery? Let's dive in. Inflation means your money loses value as prices rise. 10 years ago, a 20-pound note bought you a movie, popcorn, and a drink. Now maybe just the ticket. Your salary might go up, but if prices rise faster, you're actually worse off. This is why even a pay raise can feel like you're standing still. Inflation quietly erodes your standard of living, making it harder to keep up. The real issue isn't just higher prices, it's your money's shrinking power. Understanding this shift is key to managing your finances. The question isn't, why is everything expensive, but why does my money buy less? Inflation is tracked by measuring the average price change of a basket of everyday goods. If your weekly groceries cost £25 last year and £27 this year, that's inflation in action. It's not just food. Fuel, rent, and even pizza nights all add up. Some prices rise faster than others, but overall, the cost of living increases. Inflation is an average. Some things get cheaper, most get more expensive. That's why your paycheck doesn't stretch as far as it used to. When you feel the squeeze, it's inflation at work. It's the hidden force behind the rising cost of your lifestyle. Not all inflation is bad. A little is actually healthy for the economy. Central banks aim for about 2% inflation to keep things moving. Mild inflation encourages spending and investment, helping the economy grow. The real danger is high or unpredictable inflation, which erodes savings and hits those on fixed incomes hardest. When inflation spirals, it creates uncertainty and financial pain. The goal isn't zero inflation, but a stable, manageable rate. That's why governments and central banks watch inflation so closely. Keeping inflation in check protects your money and your future. A common driver of inflation is demand-pull inflation. It happens when demand outstrips supply. Too many people with too much money are trying to buy a limited number of products. Think of it like an auction. When multiple bidders are trying to win the same item, the price gets driven up. Prices will naturally rise to balance things out. If demand grows faster than supply, you get demand-pull inflation. A real-world example is the housing market. Intense competition forces buyers to offer more money, leading to a rapid increase in house prices. Demand-pull inflation is essentially an issue of imbalance. It's a sign of an overheating economy, creating a price surge. Another cause of rising prices is cost-push inflation, caused by an increase in the costs of production for businesses. One significant factor is the rising price of raw materials and energy. Another critical component is wages. This can lead to a wage price spiral. Cost-push inflation is about supply-side shocks, not about too much money, but about the cost of supplying goods increasing. Multiply that dilemma across every sector, and you have cost-push inflation. It's unwelcome because it's associated with a slowing economy. Monetary inflation happens when the money supply increases without a corresponding rise in goods and services. Central banks can inject money through quantitative easing, buying government bonds. If new money outpaces economic output, it fuels inflation. More money lets people spend more, increasing demand and pushing prices higher. History shows that excessive money printing, like in Weimar Germany, leads to hyperinflation. Expanding the money supply without real economic growth causes prices to rise. The value of each dollar decreases. Money's stability depends on its scarcity. In our interconnected global economy, inflation can be imported from other countries. No country is an island. Most economies rely on imports. When the cost of imported items rises, it impacts overall inflation. Imported inflation often occurs through exchange rate changes. If a country's currency weakens, imports become more expensive. Price increases in producing countries can also be exported. Global supply chain disruptions can drive up prices worldwide. This highlights how complex it is for governments to control inflation. understanding imported inflation is crucial. Inflation reduces your purchasing power. As prices rise for essentials like food, fuel, and housing, each dollar you earn is diminished. That same income can now buy fewer goods and services. This squeeze impacts your budget. The goalposts of affordability are constantly moving further away. They experience the full force of inflation's bite. Your capacity to purchase has actually shrunk. It disproportionately hurts lower and middle-income households. The constant pressure of rising prices can lead to significant financial stress. Inflation wages a quiet war on your savings. It acts as a silent thief, secretly eroding the value of your money. If you have cash in a standard savings account earning little interest, high inflation means its real value decreases daily. This slow erosion is dangerous because it can go unnoticed until it's too late. If your savings aren't growing at least equal to inflation, you're losing money. Financial advisors stress investing to outpace inflation. Keeping cash in a bank carries the risk of losing purchasing power. You must actively manage your wealth to defend it from rising prices. Inflation changes the landscape for borrowing and investing. Central banks raise interest rates to cool the economy, making borrowing more expensive for individuals and businesses. Assets like stocks and real estate can hedge against inflation, but rising interest rates can cause market volatility. A diversified portfolio is key to navigate these economic forces. When inflation threatens the economy, governments use interest rates. Central banks like the Bank of England or the U.S. Federal Reserve act as the economy's thermostat. Raising interest rates cools things down by making borrowing more expensive, impacting individuals and businesses. This reduces demand, easing price pressures. However, higher rates can slow growth and even cause a recession. Central bankers must balance controlling inflation without causing a downturn. Beyond interest rates, central banks have other methods for fighting inflation, many of which focus on directly controlling the amount of money circulating in the economy. This is the flip side of quantitative easing. To combat inflation, central banks can engage in quantitative tightening. This means the central bank is actively working to reduce the size of the money supply. Instead of injecting money by buying bonds, it sells the bonds it holds or lets them mature without reinvesting. This removes money from the financial system. When the central bank sells a bond, the money used for that purchase is taken out of circulation and returned to the central bank. This reduces the reserves that commercial banks have, which restricts their ability to lend money to individuals and businesses. With less money available, the supply of credit tightens. This makes borrowing more difficult and expensive, achieving a similar goal to raising interest rates but through a different channel. Another tool central banks use to control the money supply is adjusting reserve requirements. The reserve requirement is the percentage of customer deposits that commercial banks are legally required to hold in reserve and cannot lend out. By increasing this requirement, the central bank can instantly limit the amount of money that banks can create through lending. For instance, if the reserve requirement is raised from 10% to 15%, banks must hold on to a larger portion of their deposits, leaving them with less money to loan to customers. This directly reduces the money multiplier effect and cools down lending activity. All of these measures are designed to address the monetary causes of inflation. The underlying principle is simple. If too much money chasing too few goods is causing prices to rise, then reducing the amount of money in the system should help to bring prices back under control. All with the ultimate goal of restoring price stability and protecting the purchasing power of the currency for everyone. While central banks use monetary policy to combat inflation, the government can also play a role through fiscal policy. Fiscal policy involves government decisions on taxation and public spending. To fight inflation, a government can use contractionary fiscal policy, increasing taxes or cutting its own spending, or both. Both reduce demand in the economy, taking pressure off prices. For example, raising income taxes leaves households with less disposable income, curbing spending. Similarly, a government can reduce its own spending, delaying infrastructure projects, cutting back on public services, or reducing subsidies. When the government spends less, it lowers overall demand. This can help to cool down an overheating economy and ease inflationary pressures. However, these measures are often politically difficult, making them a less frequently used tool compared to central bank actions. Governments and central banks sometimes use other, more targeted tools. For example, a government might implement direct wage and price controls, although this is a controversial and rarely used measure as it can lead to shortages. A more common approach might be to improve the supply side of the economy, increasing competition, removing regulations, or investing in infrastructure. Finally, authorities might intervene in currency markets to strengthen their currency. A stronger currency makes imports cheaper, combating imported inflation. Fighting inflation is a complex task that often requires a coordinated effort involving monetary, fiscal, and sometimes regulatory policies. What can you actually do about inflation? Take proactive steps to protect your personal finances. Move from being a saver to becoming an investor. Put your money to work where it can grow faster than inflation. The stock market is a primary example. Another asset class is real estate. Build a diversified portfolio that spreads your risk across different types of assets. By building these financial defenses, you are taking strategic action to ensure your long-term financial security. Protecting yourself from inflation also means making smart decisions with your cash flow and spending habits right now. Review your budget and cut unnecessary expenses. Cancel unused subscriptions, plan meals to reduce waste, and look for cheaper service alternatives. Keep an accessible emergency fund in a high-interest savings account. Consider locking in prices for major future purchases. Pay down large debts with variable interest rates as quickly as possible. Combine long-term investment with disciplined budgeting and smart spending to protect your financial health. We began this journey by acknowledging a shared, frustrating experience, the feeling that everything is getting more expensive. We have since unraveled the mystery behind that feeling, decoding the concept of inflation. You now understand that inflation is not just an abstract news headline, but a powerful force that directly reduces the purchasing power of your hard-earned money. We've explored its primary causes, from too much demand and rising production costs, to money supply expansion and global price influences. This knowledge is the essential first step, transforming a vague sense of financial anxiety into a clear understanding of economic mechanics at play in your daily life. With this clarity, we delved into the tangible ways inflation impacts you, acting as a silent tax on your spending, a hidden thief eroding your savings, and a disruptive force in borrowing and investing. We also examined the powerful tools that governments and central banks use to fight back, primarily by raising interest rates to cool down the economy. But understanding the problem and official response is only half the battle. The most critical part of this journey is recognizing that you are not powerless. You have the ability to take concrete steps to shield your finances and safeguard your future from rising prices. The key lesson to take away is that in an inflationary world, financial passivity is a recipe for falling behind. You must actively engage with your money. This means shifting your mindset from simply saving cash to strategically investing in assets that can outpace inflation over the long term, such as diversified stock portfolios or real estate. It means managing your day-to-day finances with greater intention, budgeting diligently, attacking high-interest debt, and making every dollar work harder for you. The strategies we discussed are not get-rich-quick schemes. They are fundamental principles of sound financial management in the face of economic headwinds. Ultimately, inflation affects everyone, but not everyone takes time to understand it or learn how to respond. By reading this, you have already set yourself apart. You are now equipped with foundational knowledge to navigate this challenging economic landscape with greater confidence and purpose. The journey to financial empowerment is ongoing. It requires continuous learning and adaptation. Use this understanding as a springboard to seek out more knowledge, have informed conversations about money, and most importantly, take decisive action. By doing so, you can turn economic uncertainty into an opportunity to build a more resilient financial future for yourself and your family.